I'd like to call to order the West Covina Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, September 24th, 2013. Would you please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silent prayer and meditation. Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Valles? Commissioner Menifee?
Present.
Commissioner Castellanos?
Present.
Commissioner Blackburn?
Present.
Chairman Holz.
Present.
If I might take one moment to make an announcement that there was a notice sent out for, I don't have the number in front of me, but a conditional use permit for a wireless facility, South Hills Country Club. The applicant did ask for continuance on that, so it was withdrawn from the agenda, will not be heard tonight. The planning commissioners did not receive any information on that. They're not aware of what's proposed, so there will be no review of that tonight. That will be re-noticed at such time as it's rescheduled, just like it was noticed this time, and there will be an opportunity for a public hearing at that time when it's re-noticed.
You have a question?
Yeah, I got a question. So there's nothing I can move forward on that until you guys have a public hearing on it?
That's correct. The public hearing has been rescheduled, so you'll get a notice, and when that happens, you can have an opportunity to speak on that item specifically with discussion with the commission.
How many people get the information? I think it's only one person that got the information. I didn't get it. My house is right next to it.
I don't have the...
I don't get the letters, right?
You can contact us tomorrow in the planning department. We can let you know who's on the mailing list. There's more than one person that was noticed. We don't know right now.
It'll be about the same time of the evening?
Oh, yes, yes, it'll be a 7 o'clock meeting just like this one.
Okay.
And they're always on Tuesdays.
Okay.
No. The planning commission meets the second and fourth Tuesday nights of each month when they have items. Exactly. Second and fourth. The agenda is posted online the Thursday night before it, yes.
Anyone else? Okay. Are there any additions or corrections to
Do you
the...
have a question? You had one other gentleman, I think, with a question.
I'm sorry.
You can still speak right now, right? But there's no discussion time. Is that correct?
Correct. We have a public comment portion, which you can speak on consent items or non-consent items. However, again, when we have the public hearing on that item, public discussion on that specific item will be within the record, and so it actually legally make a difference, and the commission actually discuss the item with you. So currently, they can only take comment and will not be able to comment back.
Sir, did you have a question?
No. The people that just came in, I don't know if you heard, the issue about the South Hills is not going to be tonight, if that's why you're here. It'll be scheduled for a later meeting. Okay? I mean, you're welcome to stay, but we won't be talking about it tonight. I'm sorry? I don't know at
We
this
don't have a
point in time.
specific date at the moment, but a notice will go out. It will be published in the newspaper, etc. So.
Okay, could we have approval of the minutes from September 10th? Any additions or corrections? None? If not, they stand approved.
That brings us to oral communications. This is a time when any member of the public may speak to the Commission on any matter within the scope of duties assigned to the Commission relating to non-agendized or consent calendar items. Other matters included on this agenda may be addressed when that item is under consideration. For all oral communication, the chairperson may impose reasonable limitations on public comments to assure an order and timely meeting. The Ralph M. Brown Act limits the Planning Commission and staff's ability to respond to public comments at this meeting. Thus, your comments may, your comments may be agendized for a future meeting or referred to staff. The Commission may ask questions for clarification if desired at this time. By policy of Commission, oral communications at this time on the agenda is limited to a total of 5 minutes. Persons who are not afforded the opportunity to speak at this time may do so under item E later on the agenda. Do we have anyone that wants to speak? I've got some speaker cards here.
Chairperson Holtz?
Yes.
If I may, before we start that, just wanted to advise the Planning Commission, since we know that there are some folks here that are planning to speak on a future item that will be a public hearing, my advice to the Commission is not to comment back because we have a pending public hearing at a later date.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with this one. Jeremy in Francis? Okay. Come on up, please.
Hi, good evening, Planning
Good evening.
Commission. I thank you for your time and opportunity to speak tonight. I just wanted to touch base briefly on a pending issue item that's been on the some of your agendas for an undetermined amount of time. The last time I came and spoke to your commission was in 2007, and that was in regards to the 20-unit condo project on 856 South Sunset. Now, just to give you a little bit of the history, I don't believe any of you gentlemen were on the commission at that time. And during that time period, the Planning Commission voted against that 20-unit condo project. It subsequently went to the City Council and was approved. Ultimately, the project never was built, and that was in large part due to a lot of the residents that voiced their opposition to it. So I speak to you on behalf of a number of residents that are concerned that it's coming up again as a pending item. I know we can't control ultimately what the owner of that property wants to do or what he does on his own time, but I ask you tonight if momentum does build for this project again, that we be included in any kind of information, any kind of notifications. The first time around, I did receive a mailer that this was a pending item, and it enabled us to rally our opposition to the project. And ultimately, if that comes again, we really would appreciate your commission's communication to the residents on this pending item. And also, too, we really need clarification, if you, to the extent that you can, why it is a pending item again, because frankly, that's got a lot of us extremely nervous that this is being talked about. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your hearing me on this matter, and hopefully we can continue some positive dialogue, and you know, the residents that are concerned, they can be heard if it needs to be that way. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do you want to comment on that at this time, Jeff?
Well, only to say that it hasn't come back. It's been on the list for the last 5-6 years, and it's because it's a case that's still unresolved.
Okay, thank you. Alvin Love.
About all the questions of Jerry. My one question is, it's been pending since June of last year. How long can this go on?
Actually, it's indefinite as long as they want to refile. So there's no exact time limit on it, unless I'm not...
Well, perhaps when oral communication's over, I can address that a little bit further.
Okay. We'll address that a little bit later. Thank you. Sheena Heng.
Okay. Yes, sir. Good evening, council member. Actually, commissioner, planning commissioner, right? This is my first time. Sorry.
Okay.
My name is Sheena Heng, and I'm a West Covina resident, and I'm here tonight to let you know that a new cell tower was proposed in my neighborhood at the corner of Barranca and Cameron. On record, my neighbors and I oppose this plan, and we currently have over 120 signed petitions that we do not want this tower. This tower is in a residential area, and we don't want microwave radiation beaming at us 24 hours. It is too close to South Hills High School, and we don't want this microwave radiation beaming at our kids 8 to 10 hours a day while they're in school. This is a 60-foot fake tree, and it will devalue our property. We did not buy our house close by an electrical tower or cell tower, and we certainly don't want one built close by us. Our quality of life will go down. Now, this is a diagram that shows the type of antenna that this can go onto the tower. And one go this way, and then there's one beam this way. So even if you live a little bit further, you can still hit with the same type of the microwave radiations. So let me show you. So there are different type of antennas, and it's also depend on how high the voltage is. So you can get hit with this type of antenna. You can live right here and get hit as much as over here as well. So you can live further away from this tower and still get hit, depending on how strong the antenna is used. Now, this cell tower is sending microwave radiations, and the World Health Organization said it caused carcinogen. The U.S. Air Force did a study for 10 years on rat and spent over $5 million, and the rats have cancer. Study has shown this microwave radiation causes cancer. Our International Fire Association signed a resolution that don't want cell tower on top of where they work, and this is since starting 2005. And we don't want one near where we live either. Elway School did not want the cell tower on this school ground. You, member of Planning Commission, need to listen to a group of scientists in the world, and they are telling us this causes carcinogen. The world scientists in our own U.S. Air Force study concluded that these waves give us cancers. How can we ignore the scientists? We cannot ignore these scientists and listen to Verizon, whose main purpose is to make money. Verizon don't care about our health. Verizon don't care that the noise and the wave from the antenna can cause us to not be able to get a good night's sleep ever. If this constant humming noise from the antenna gives us discomfort, I cannot imagine what the noise will do to our pets. The birds and bees will not be around, so even our fruit tree will not give us fruits. Our quality of life will go down. We no longer have the same neighborhood after this tower, after they built this cell tower. The bees will be gone, the birds will be gone, and us and our pets will have constant discomfort. We cannot pick up and leave like our bees and birds. Everything that we work for our entire life goes to our home, and it goes to our property tax. That's all we have. So if you allow this cell tower to be built, then a thief would be better than all of you guys, because a thief only steals one home. You rob the whole community. If this cell tower is giving us cancer, who is going to buy our house? Who is going to have their kids going to school knowing that this cell tower possibly gives cancers to their kids? And the cell tower is just across the street from where they are for 4 years. Everyone's home is going to go down. Knowing that this radiation would have more effect on the very young, the very old, and the very sick, that makes up my family. How can I have any of these people to my house? My uncle just had a liver transplant, and he just got a second chance in life. I cannot have him at my house because this cell tower will make him sick and break down the very cell that he's trying to grow. My nephew and nieces are under 3, and their brains are not fully developed yet. I cannot have them at my house because the cell tower will possibly give them cancer. My dad is in his 80s, and he too cannot come to my house because the cell tower will possibly give him cancer because he's a senior and he's weak. So if all the people I love and care for cannot come to my house, then what is a home without the people you love in it? My quality of life will go down. My property value, which is all the assets I will have, will also go down. My neighbor and I ask that the Planning Commission make and have better scientific study that this cell tower will not harm us before approving any more tower to be built in the future. surrounded by residents and schools. This tower affects so many of us, and yet only 32 people are informed. In the future, we are planning to be involved and inform more than 32 people because this affects more than 32 people. I have a petition here that almost everyone in our neighbor no cell tower sign. Everyone? So everyone were here today, and then they changed the schedule on us as well. So that's what it is. Thank you. And these are the petitions.
You realize we can't comment on it because it's not on the agenda.
I understand, but
So
I also
my
want...
recommendation is that when it does come on the agenda, that you come back at that time.
I just want to go on record that we do have petitions and we do have neighbors around us that do not want this cell tower to be built.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on oral communications at this time? No? Okay, I'll close the oral communication. Go to the consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and can be acted on by one vote.
Chairman Holtz,
I'm sorry.
if you wanted me to respond to the one question, the state has extended the track map time period, so that's why it's still a valid application, because the state has extended those track map applications. I believe it'll be valid for another year or two.
Did you, who was it, Alvin? Alvin Love, did you understand his comment to your question? Jeff, could you repeat it?
The state has extended the track maps. So the track map was approved for that site. It hasn't been acted upon, but the approval is still there, and so the state has continued to extend those to try to encourage development in California. So that's one of the reasons it's still valid. We haven't had any communications from the applicant in several years.
That satisfy your question?
I'm not sure that I understand why it remains a continuing. I understand what he said, but why it remains a continuing.
Well, it can be remain on there. So, Paul.
Is this property 856?
Yeah, this is not really appropriate for a discussion here. It's not on the agenda. What needs to happen is we can get you my card, and you can contact me during work hours. That'd be a better way to handle that, and I can provide you the information.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Blackburn, you had a question?
I just had a comment on the project status report. It shows that property, that the PC approval expires on 4/3/2014.
That is what, I'm not sure that's totally correct, because the state did extend it again, but it expires then, or whenever the state extended, we're still working on the extension.
But that's the latest that we know is
Yes, yes.
Okay, we'll start over again. Consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and can be acted on by one vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the Planning Commission request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussion or action. Does anyone wish anything to be removed or discussed from the consent calendar? No? Okay, we'll receive and file. We have a motion on that? Second?
Second.
Okay, we have first, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Okay, this brings us to, there is no public hearings. This brings us to non-hearing items, study session, Code Amendment number 13-04, commercial parking standards. Do we have a staff report, or how do we go into this?
We are going to have a staff report.
All right.
On July 9th, 2013, the Planning Commission initiated a code amendment to study the commercial parking standards. And that study session had to do, or came about because of a study session earlier on the number and types of variances that had been processed or submitted by applicants over the last 5 years or so. Deviations from commercial parking standards was one of the most requested type of variances in that time period. So that's why it came up, and that's why it was requested that we study this. The purpose of this study session is to begin discussions on whether changes are appropriate to the commercial parking standards that might reduce the number of variances reviewed. And I did provide a chart on page 1 of the staff report that indicates the types of variances from parking standards that were submitted over that time period. just by way of discussing how the code is established right now, there are 4 categories of commercial parking standards. There are individual use parking standards, which is what we deal with most of the time. There are common facility parking standards. There are joint use parking standards, and there are minor parking reduction allowances. And I've kind of given you a synopsis of each one of those types on page 2 of the staff report. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but I just sort of wanted to provide that for educational purposes. Tonight we're going to be looking at some individual standards and some common facility standards. The other thing that I did to try to sort of educate you on how the code works is we did provide on attachment 3 the individual parking standards. So the uses that are most common that we have applied for, those parking standards are shown on attachment 3. So again, we're going to be looking at the 2 types we're going to be looking at are individual standards and common facilities. And we have my chart that I'm sure you guys all see in your sleep when you're trying to sleep. So we're going to walk through this chart just like we did a couple weeks ago on a different item. And please interrupt me. I'm going to go through this kind of slow, but I want to kind of the purpose of this is to engender conversation and discussion about the merits. The one thing I guess I should...
Can I just ask a quick question before we start? Has there been any concerns or problems with the way it is right now? I mean, has anybody come forward and voiced a complaint the way it is today?
I'm not sure I would say anybody's come forward and voiced a complaint, but the variances applications themselves is one form of saying we're not necessarily too happy with the way the code is established.
So our staff is not, the city is not too happy?
Well, I shouldn't say that. The city is not too happy. I guess let me put it differently. The applicants sometimes feel that the standards are too conservative.
Okay.
So they apply for a variance to ask for them to be more
Okay, so the
liberal.
applicants have brought it more or less forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it is. So about a year ago, I think it was, we had a study session where all we did was talk about the categories of variances that were proposed over the last 5 years.
Okay.
And it slipped my mind what pylon signs. That was the number one. That's why we went through the code amendment process to look at those. It came from that discussion. This is also coming out of that discussion, albeit a little bit later than that first one, because we at the time discussed doing them one at a time.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
That's where this came from. And the issues that we're looking at tonight are mostly, from staff's point of view, what we get the most questions about or concerns about. And as you're all aware that developers are sometimes trying to make a project pencil out, and they're trying to make it economic sense. And surface parking is expensive because the ground is expensive. So that's part of the issue here. And then it's the balance between providing enough parking, but maybe not too much parking, so that you provide a better economic return for the developers and encourage development in the city. So that's the concept.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
May I interrupt for a moment? Are these actionable items tonight?
They are not actionable tonight.
Okay.
Tonight, my point is to get your viewpoint on it, and like we've done with some others, there may be further study needed on my part from questions that you may ask. After we finish looking at this, staff is going to take another look at some of the parking standards. We may come back with a second study session on this with different items too, because I think there's a couple others we think that might be worth examining, especially after looking at what other city standards are. So 6 standards we have before you on the chart, and on attachment 1 in your staff report is the survey of surrounding cities, and we provided you 3 of those that provide you some information. That is always helpful to us to know sort of where we fall in that range. These are just the surrounding cities. We didn't, in LA County there's 88 or 90 cities, so we didn't do an exhaustive research. We just did the cities around us to see where we fell in that range. Okay, so number 1 that's before us tonight is business, general retail, and personal service parking requirements. So that's your retail businesses, your general service businesses. When you go to a shopping center, most of the uses in there are probably parked at this standard. The municipal code requires 1 parking space for every 250 square feet of floor area for general retail and personal services. So that's 4 per thousand. Another way of saying it is 4 per thousand, or 1 for 250. 4 options that we kind of looked at there. Option 1, no change. Option 2 would be to change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 275 square feet, which reduces the parking requirement. Option 3, change the parking requirement to 1 space per 225, which actually increases the parking requirement. And then number 4, change the parking requirement to 1 space per every 200 square feet. We thought it was important to have this discussion, although as we, and some thought maybe it'd be a good idea to lower, but when we looked at the other cities surrounding us, we all have the same standards. Well, we have the lowest standard now, which is 1 to 250. All the other cities either have that or something higher standard. So after looking at that, we feel that we're probably in the right place at 1 to 250. So our recommendation would be to go ahead and stay with that. But again, we did want to provide that as a discussion topic because it is the majority standard of businesses in the city. It's the most common.
I want to make sure I understand what you just said. As we compare with the other cities, the number of square feet per parking space we require is 250.
Yes.
But I see, you said something about it being the lowest, and
Yeah, it's a little confusing.
there's 225 and 200, which would mean more parking places.
That would require more parking spaces,
Right.
So that would raise the parking requirement.
So you were talking about the number of parking spaces, not the square footage.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
I have a question, Jeff. It looked like 5 of the 8 cities are basically 250. I see some of the comparisons listing gross floor space. Could you just elaborate on that? Is that less restrooms or less closet space? What is considered gross floor space?
You're probably right, Commissioner Blackburn. That's probably, I'd have to look at each one of the codes, which obviously didn't take time to do that. Ours eliminates certain things like restrooms and janitorial closets, so I assume some of the other ones do. There may be codes that don't do that, so there's no difference between gross and net. But that is probably the...
I thought that's what it was. Thank you.
Any discussion on the option we should... is everybody comfortable with staff's recommendation on that? Okay. All right, we'll go to number 2 then. Number 2 is restaurant parking requirement. The code currently requires 1 parking space for every 3.5 permanent seats and 1 space for every 40 square feet of assembly area not occupied by seat. This standard has been difficult for staff to monitor over time as seating arrangements can change from time to time at restaurants. And I don't know how, I worked at several restaurants as a youth, and I know that the number of seats can change from night to night. So it has been my concern that that's not a very valid measurement. Also, when you're asking people how many seats, the parking is going to go down if they tell you a lower number of seats. So there's an incentive for someone not to tell you the truth because then their parking requirement goes down. So that can be an issue as well. And the issue there is, in fairness, you are punishing the honest person and you're rewarding the person who's not. So for those 2 reasons, I've always had a concern since I worked here about using that standard instead of a square footage standard, which we use for most types of uses. So option 1 is no change, to keep it at 1 to 3.5. Option 2 is to change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 100 square feet of floor area. And option 3 is change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 75 square feet. And so we're recommending option 2, 1 per 100. This is the most common standard for requirements based on the floor area that we have for neighboring cities. And it is what the city actually has used in the code when we have speculative restaurants. In other words, we have restaurant square footage is proposed, but we don't know who it's going to be. We don't know how many seats. So we have used 1 to 100 before. So that is our suggestion.
Got a question. What about capacity? How does capacity, has that come into play as a measurement or guide for?
Well, that's a good question. And occupancy, I believe, is the term.
Okay.
When they posted on the wall the occupancy limit,
The
occupancy is limited by fire department building code for the fire department, and that is a different type of measurement. It has to do with how fast people can exit and how much space there is. That is usually not determined till late in the plan check process, whereas we usually have to determine how many parking spaces are required early in the process to know if it's allowed. So generally, most cities, as you can see in the chart, do it by square footage, and the occupancy is a totally separate issue. Parking is this. The occupancy that you can have, the number of people in the building is this. I have seen cities that have established parking based on occupancy, but I think it would be very difficult to do that.
Is it possible to set a standard initially when it opens, and then once the fire department and that goes in and does the occupancy, to tweak it?
Well, it might be possible, but if we walk through that scenario, someone comes in and says, we change it to 1 to 100, a 1,000-square-foot restaurant, they need 10 parking spaces, but there's only 8 available. So there's nowhere else you can go from there. Even if they say we want to do it based on occupancy, how do we know what the occupancy is going to be until they have to prepare their plans and submit them to the plan checker before he can do the calculation to determine what the occupancy is going to be.
Okay.
Any other questions about that? Any concerns? Or recommend going ahead with that? Okay. All right. Let's see. So now we're on number 3. And this is restaurant outdoor seating not covered by a permanent canopy. So you have basically 2 different kinds of outdoor seating restaurants. You have some that are basically built over, and those are sometimes not that different from the interior space, so they're pretty valuable outside seating. But you have other seating that is under umbrellas or sometimes just out in the open and is not as valuable for people to sit at. The municipal code requires 1 parking space for every 5 seats. If the Planning Commission recommends changing the standard for restaurant, which we just talked about doing, then it would also make sense to change the standard for outdoor seating to fit that. So 4 options there. 1, no change. Option 2, change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 100 square feet of floor area, which is what we talked about for restaurants, so it would be the same. Option 3, change the parking requirement to 1 parking space for every 150 square feet of floor area. And option 4, change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 200 square feet of floor area. Staff feels that option 3 would be the best one to go with in this case. Revising the requirement to 1 per 150 will be consistent with the recommended change to restaurant parking and provide for reduced parking for outside seating to encourage a more pedestrian-friendly atmosphere, but in also recognition that outdoor seating is generally not used as often as interior seating, especially in the wintertime or in the hot temperatures of the summer. Everybody satisfied with that one? Okay. All right, number 4. Fitness centers, which is in our code called athletic clubs and gymnasiums, the parking requirement. The municipal code requires 1 parking space for every 100 square feet of floor area for a gymnasium. Alternatively, a parking study can be completed by a traffic consultant and submitted for review by the Planning Commission. The preparation of a parking study can be expensive, and parking studies have resulted in varied conclusions, and I've provided you some of those conclusions. 7.24 at one place, 5.19 at another, 6.83 at another, and another used to basically 10 per 1,000. So it has ranged, and we have approved all those. All those have been approved at those parking standards that they have, that the parking study showed they would be able to function at. So 4 options. 1 is no change. Option 2, change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 200 square feet of floor area. Option 3, change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 150 square feet of floor area. And option 4 is change the parking requirement to 1 parking space per 75 square feet of floor area. Staff is recommending option 3, that's 1 to 150. So that would be lowering the parking requirement from 1 to 100 to 1 to 150. Several surrounding cities use this standard, as you can see from the survey on attachment 1. This is equivalent to 6.66 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet, which is similar to the parking requirement which we allowed for LA Fitness, which is under construction, and the 24-hour fitness, which is right across the street here. So that's the similar parking standard that they're going to be, that one already has been occupying or has been operating with for 10 or 12 years. This one will be operating at that same parking standard. So that's the reason we're recommending that.
So this one across the street is under
that
100 square feet?
That 24-hour fitness was put in at 6.83 per 1,000.
The one across the street?
Yeah.
Okay, because A few times I've been in there, the thing has been packed. Their parking is really tough. And there really isn't any other place to go, but when you go to the one on Azusa,
Yeah.
Francisco, I mean, that's a big parking area for other shops and all that. And same with LA Fitness that's going in. There's other spaces there.
Yeah.
So it's almost depending on where they're going in.
If there's, you're suggesting if there's overflow parking, it might make sense to have a lower standard.
I don't know. I really don't know. I just know that over here it's packed. But the other ones are in a space where there's other parking for restaurants and things like that. So I don't know that if we make a standard, can there be a variance to that? If they've asked for a variance?
Well, yes, there can always be a variance. I mean, that's how sort of we got to this discussion to begin with. You can request a variance. The city can also ask for a higher parking requirement. We don't have to. This is whatever parking requirement we have is the minimum. Doesn't mean if it's a discretionary item like a conditional use permit for a fitness center, doesn't mean the city has to approve it at the minimum.
Yeah.
Like, we could ask for more parking. That's sometimes difficult to do, but it is in the range of possibility. And I would say that the reason we have the standard we have now that allows for the parking study is maybe the very reason you're bringing out. So it sets a fairly high standard, but then it says if you don't want to follow that standard, you have to do a parking study, and the parking study analyzes some of the issues that you're bringing up.
Yeah. And then again, it depends on what time of day you're talking about, for being crowded. I mean, there's like peaks and then valleys and all that
And the parking study does analyze that. They don't just analyze one time of the day. They analyze the high point and the low point of the parking to make sure there's enough. And generally with a mixture of uses like we're going to have at the LA Fitness as well as at the Murakami Mara South Hills Shopping Center, there's a mix of uses. Some of them are early, daytime uses. Some are nighttime uses. Fitness centers are generally evening uses. There's not too many people there during the day. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that or any thoughts? I don't know if I guess my question there is: are you comfortable with option 3, or would you rather just leave it at option 1 and let people continue to ask for the parking study? So you're comfortable with option 3? Okay. All right. All right. So now we're at number 5. Number 5 and 6 are common facilities. So the first 4 were the individual standards that we look at, or that are in the code. These are the common facilities. So there's 2 types of common facilities. You basically have common facilities that are between 5,000 and 75,000 square feet. And then you have common facilities that are over 75,000 square feet. And I use the term common facilities because that's what the code uses. Basically, we're talking about a shopping center, a multi-tenant retail center. That's what a common facility is. So currently, common facilities between 5,000 and 75,000 square feet allow for parking requirements to be reduced up to 15% with the approval of a conditional use permit. So in looking at this, option 1 is no change. Option 2 would be to establish an automatic reduction of 5% by right. In other words, if they're in that range, they automatically get that 5% reduction. So we tally it into our parking. We have parking charts for most centers in town. We just tally the 5% automatic reduction that everybody gets that. Option 3 would be to establish an automatic reduction of up to 15% by right. In other words, do away with the CUP for the Planning Commission. Just say everybody that's in that range gets 15% reduction.
Will option 2 be a total of 20% or?
No, let me, I think I skipped too fast over that. So option 2 would be to establish an automatic reduction of 5% by right, and then allow for an additional reduction up to 15%. So an additional 10%.
10%. Okay. I want to make sure. Okay.
And so staff is recommending that option. The common facility standard recognizes that centers with multiple tenants reduce parking per tenant, as patrons may visit more than one tenant per visit. And as we just talked about, in a multi-tenant center, you have some that are busy during the morning, some that are busy in the afternoon, some that are busy in the evening. In centers, a lot of times you go and there will be some vacancies. That's not unusual to have a certain percentage of vacancies at any given time. So all those things combined generally reduce the parking requirement per square footage per tenant. Establishing an automatic 5% reduction for smaller centers recognizes that while allowing for an applicant to request or recognizes that issue while allowing an applicant to request greater parking reduction up to 15%. Any comments or questions on that? Yeah, comfort level with that one? Okay. Number 6, the last one, common facilities that are 75,000 square feet or larger. So this is the larger centers in town. Those that are greater than 75,000 square feet allow for parking requirements to be reduced up to 20% with the approval of a conditional use permit. So very similarly, the options are number 1, no change. Number 2, establish an automatic reduction of 10% by right, and then allow for a conditional use permit to reduce up to 20% reduction. Option 3, establish an automatic reduction of 20%. So our recommendation is number 2, automatic 10% if you're over 75,000 square feet, and then allow for a request for up to 20% if they need additional parking and if the circumstances warrant that.
Why did you not use the same 5 and 15 that you did for up to 5,000 to 74? Okay. And you went from 10 to 20. Is there any particular reason why?
Well, the reason is because that's what the code is right now. So the code right now allows, well, let me explain that. I didn't say that very well. The code right now allows for centers that are under 75,000 square feet to ask for up to a 15% reduction. Okay. It allows for those over 75,000 square feet to ask for a 20% reduction. So that's why I started with that number, because that's what the code has right now. I think it's just in recognition that the larger the center, the more likely there's going to be a range of intensity of uses and more. You know, you go to the mall, you might visit 8 or 10 tenants at one time. If you go to a shopping center, more of a traditional shopping center, you're probably not going to visit more than 2 or 3. So it's sort of a recognition of that.
So instead of jumping to the 15 and 20 right away, you're going 5 at first and then 10. What you're doing is,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You're putting a step in there.
Yeah, that's right,
Okay.
putting a step. They get an automatic reduction that doesn't cost any money. There's no need to go through any process and take a chance on anything. But if they want the higher level, then they can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
And that concludes. Is everybody comfortable with that? So it appears that I probably should buy a lottery ticket tonight. So you agreed with all my recommendations, I think. So all right. So what that brings us to the conclusion of this presentation. As I said, I think staff is going to be putting our heads together and looking at some other standards and see if there's some other things we'd like to bring back to you, because this is an opportunity, I think, to try to maybe reduce some of the burden on the development community if we have standards that we think are maybe not appropriate to what we want to be. So we'll likely be doing that over the next month or so. That concludes my presentation. Appreciate your input.
Thank you. Great staff work on that. Probably a lot of hours put in on that. Thank you much. Okay, continuation of oral communications. Anybody wish to speak on oral communications? Okay, commission reports, comments, and miscellaneous items. This is a time when any member of the commission may bring a matter to the attention of the full commission that is within the scope of duties assigned to the commission. Any item that was considered during the agenda is not appropriate for discussion in this section of the agenda. No commission discussion or action can be considered at this time. If the commission desires to discuss an issue raised by a speaker or take an action, the commission may vote to agendize the matter for a future meeting. Nothing? Nothing? Okay. Planning Director's report.
We have the project status there on your in the report this time of the projects that the Planning Commission has approved over the last few years. I did also would say in the forthcoming, just so everyone realizes that we don't have any, there are no items currently for the October 8th meeting, so it's likely we will not have a meeting that night.
Okay.
But we apparently will have at least a couple items on the October 22nd. So don't go out of town for too long.
Okay, City Council action.
I don't have anything to report in City Council.
Okay. No one has anything else to bring up? Okay. If not, we stand adjourned.